I am a 39-year-old man who has been married to my wife, now 37, for 15 years. We have 2 children together, a 14-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. Our marriage, until recently, was what I believe to be a stable and happy one. Like most long-term relationships, we've had our ups and downs, but nothing ever felt unmanageable. I thought we were a team. I thought we shared the same values and goals. That perception shattered about a year and a half ago when my wife came to me with a proposition I never saw coming. She wanted to open our marriage. Her reason, as she explained it, was boredom. She felt stuck and unfulfilled. She said she still loved me, but wanted the freedom to explore other relationships while remaining married. At first, I thought it was a joke, but the seriousness in her eyes and the determination in her voice made it clear she had already made up her mind. I was blindsided. We had built a life together, a family. How could she want something like this? I immediately pushed back, telling her this was not what I signed up for. I didn't understand why she would want to risk everything we had built together for what felt like a selfish desire. She wasn't deterred. In fact, she doubled down. She told me she felt trapped, that this was something she needed to do for herself. She argued that an open marriage could bring us closer because it would allow us to be completely honest with each other. I disagreed vehemently, telling her I could never be okay with it. I told her that opening our marriage felt like inviting disaster into our lives. But my protests didn't matter. She made it clear that this was happening, with or without my consent. She even hinted at divorce if I refused to go along with her plan. Faced with the threat of losing her and breaking up our family, I reluctantly agreed to try it, though I made my reservations known. We established some ground rules. No bringing partners to our home, no discussing our other relationships, and keeping this arrangement completely hidden from our children and families. I hoped that setting boundaries would help me cope with something I didn't truly want. In hindsight, I realize I was clinging to the hope that this was just a phase, that she'd come to her senses before any real damage was done. But the reality of the situation hit me hard and fast. Barely a week after our agreement, my wife began staying out late, sometimes not coming home until 4 a.m. She was evasive about where she had been, giving vague excuses that didn't add up. It didn't take long to realize she already had someone in mind before she even brought up the idea of an open marriage. The knowledge that she had likely been emotionally, if not physically, involved with someone else before we even discussed opening our marriage was a gut punch. I felt betrayed, even though she technically wasn't breaking the new rules we had set. While she seemed to dive headfirst into this new lifestyle, I was left reeling. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus at work. I felt like my entire world was crumbling. For weeks, I tried to process the situation, hoping my feelings of hurt and jealousy would subside. But instead, they festered. It wasn't until a friend suggested I try dating as well that I began to consider the possibility. If my wife was going to explore other relationships, maybe I needed to do the same to even the playing field. Enter Amber. Amber is a divorced mother whose daughter is in the same marching band as ours. We'd crossed paths before at school events, but I never thought of her as anything more than another parent. After bumping into her at a coffee shop one afternoon, we struck up a conversation that eventually led to us exchanging numbers. What started as friendly chats evolved into something more. Amber and I began a no-strings-attached relationship. She was aware of my situation, and her own past experiences made her understanding and compassionate. Surprisingly, being with Amber had an unexpected effect on my marriage. The passion that had been missing from my relationship with my wife suddenly reignited. Perhaps it was guilt or the realization that I could also find fulfillment outside our marriage. But my wife's attitude toward me became more attentive and affectionate. For a brief period, I thought we might actually make this arrangement work. But then, everything changed. My wife's relationship with her new partner ended abruptly. She was devastated, though she tried to hide it. I offered support, but she grew increasingly bitter and resentful, especially when she discovered I was seeing Amber. The jealousy she had dismissed as an irrational fear when I expressed it at the start of our open marriage came crashing down on her. She demanded I end things with Amber immediately, claiming it was different for me because I wasn't supposed to get emotionally involved. I reminded her that we had agreed to keep our outside relationships private and respectful. I wasn't flaunting anything, and I had adhered to every rule we set. Her reaction felt hypocritical and unfair. That's when she proposed closing the marriage again. She claimed she no longer wanted to see anyone else and hoped we could go back to how things were before. A part of me wanted to jump at the chance to return to normalcy, to erase the emotional chaos that had become our lives. But the other part, the rational, hurt, and wary part, knew better. The damage had already been done, and no amount of promises or pleas could undo it. I told her I'd consider it, but only under one condition. We needed boundaries to protect ourselves if things went south again. This included waiving spousal support in the event of a divorce. I thought this was reasonable, even necessary, given how fragile our marriage had become. But she didn't see it that way. She exploded, accusing me of plotting to leave her for Amber. Her words were sharp, venomous, and full of fear disguised as anger. She painted herself as the victim, her tears falling as she shouted that I was breaking our family apart. The argument escalated quickly, with neither of us backing down. For the first time, I began to seriously question whether our marriage could be saved. Things took an even darker turn when I discovered she had been tracking my movements. I had no idea she was capable of something so invasive, but there it was, proof on her phone's location history. She had been following me, and one evening, she used it to confront me. I had just left Amber's house when I saw her car parked in the driveway. She stormed out, fury radiating off her. She accused me of betraying her, of putting another woman above our family. Her voice cracked as she shouted, and I just stood there, stunned by her audacity. This was the same woman who had insisted on opening our marriage, who had stayed out all night with her own partner while I was at home with the kids. Now she was playing the victim, twisting the narrative to suit her guilt-ridden perspective. I couldn't hold back anymore. I called her out right there in the driveway. I told her she had no right to invade my privacy or interfere in a relationship she had explicitly given me permission to pursue. She tried to justify her actions, claiming she was protecting our family. But the truth came out in her next breath. She admitted she couldn't stand the thought of me being with someone else. Her jealousy and insecurity had consumed her, and it was tearing apart what little trust we had left. But her behavior didn't stop there. As if stalking me wasn't enough, she involved our children. She told our 14-year-old daughter that I was having an affair, painting herself as the innocent, wronged party. When my daughter confronted me in tears, her voice trembling as she asked why I would cheat on her mom, my heart broke. That moment will haunt me forever. I never wanted my children to be dragged into this mess, but now they were right in the middle of it. I had no choice but to explain the truth in a way she could understand. I showed her receipts proving I hadn't stayed overnight at Amber's house and reassured her that I loved her and her brother more than anything in the world. but the damage had been done. My daughter looked at me differently after that day. The trust between us, once unshakable, was fractured. And though I've tried to repair it, I'm not sure it will ever fully heal. I couldn't let her actions go unanswered. She had crossed a line by involving our children, and I needed her to face the consequences of her choices. In retaliation, I reached out to the wife of her former boyfriend, the man she had been seeing when our marriage was open. I informed her of the affair, suspecting it might have been a factor in their divorce. The fallout was immediate and intense. My wife was livid. She accused me of ruining her ex's life and escalating our already volatile situation. But I didn't feel guilty. She had played dirty first, and I wasn't about to sit back and let her continue to manipulate the narrative. We tried therapy after that, though in hindsight, it may have been too little, too late. Each session was like peeling back another layer of resentment and betrayal. My wife refused to take accountability for her actions, instead deflecting blame onto me. She claimed I had abandoned her emotionally, that my relationship with Amber had shattered her self-esteem. But I wasn't buying it. I reminded her that opening our marriage had been her idea, that she had been the one to set this chain of events into motion. The more we argued, the more the cracks in our relationship became impossible to ignore. Eventually, I realized there was no salvaging what we once had. The trust was gone, and without trust, there can be no marriage. I consulted a lawyer and began the process of filing for divorce. The decision was agonizing. Ending a 15-year relationship felt like ripping out a part of myself. I spent countless sleepless nights wondering if there was something I could have done differently, something that could have saved us. But deep down, I knew this wasn't entirely my fault. My wife had made choices that fractured our bond, and while my actions hadn't helped, they were reactions to the pain she had caused. My children are my biggest concern now. They've already been deeply affected by all of this, and I'm doing everything I can to shield them from the ugliness. My daughter's trust in me has been shaken, and I see it in the way she hesitates before speaking to me, the way she looks away when I try to comfort her. My son, though quieter, has started acting out at school, an outlet for the confusion and anger he doesn't yet know how to express. I've reassured them that both their parents love them and will always be there for them. But I worry about the long-term impact this will have on their emotional well-being. As for Amber, our relationship has cooled considerably. She's been supportive and understanding throughout all of this, but the complications of my situation have made it hard for us to move forward together. I don't blame her for stepping back. She deserves stability, someone who can give her the commitment she's looking for. And right now, I'm not in a position to offer that. Looking back, I feel a profound sense of loss, not just for my marriage, but for the life I thought we were building together. My wife's decision to open our marriage revealed sides of both of us that I never wanted to see. It's a painful reminder that even the strongest relationships can crumble under the weight of unmet needs and unresolved issues. Moving forward, my focus is on my children. I want to provide them with as much stability and love as possible during this difficult time. I want them to see that even when things fall apart, it's possible to rebuild. As for my wife, I wish her the best. Despite everything, I don't hate her. I don't want to spend the rest of my life carrying bitterness towards someone I once loved deeply. Our journey together has come to an end, and while it's not the ending I wanted, it's the one we've reached. All I can do now is focus on healing, learning from the mistakes we both made, and building a better future for myself and my kids. The road ahead won't be easy, but it's the only one left to take. And I'm determined to walk it with my head held high.